Okay, this is already weird because I thought the first message was jealousy. Like somebody watching you glow up, getting uncomfortable, wishing they had paid attention sooner. But then the Ace of Cups came out, and that changed the whole thing. I'm using this card as a psychological mirror, not a prediction, and the cup is overflowing. There's more emotion here than this person has room to contain, and that is why their current relationship is starting to feel different. Because this isn't somebody who simply thinks you're attractive. They were able to handle attraction. They cannot handle what you are making them feel about themselves. Wait, because there's a difference. You showing up more confident, more focused, maybe looking better, dressing differently, taking care of yourself, becoming quieter about your plans, whatever your glow-up has looked like. It has created contrast, and contrast is dangerous when somebody has been surviving on emotional autopilot. I keep getting this thought like, why am I more excited to see them than I am to go home? That is not a comfortable thought when you already have a partner. And I don't think they wanted to admit it at first. I think they tried to make you small in their mind. A crush, a distraction, a pretty face. Somebody interesting, something temporary. But the cup keeps overflowing. The more they try to reduce the feeling, the more complicated it becomes. And this is where it gets awkward. Because I'm seeing them notice little things now. They compare conversations. They notice who they want to tell good news to first. They catch themselves wondering what you would think. They may even open their phone and somehow end up checking whether you posted. I'm also getting silver jewelry, a green drink, receipts in a car door, the number 27, and a person who always loses one earbud. I have no idea who needs that, but okay. The strangest part is that I don't think you're chasing this person at all. You may barely be giving them anything. And that is exactly why this is getting stronger. Because your glow-up didn't make you louder. It made you harder to access. And now they're asking a question they cannot unask. If I'm this emotionally affected by someone I'm not even with, what does that say about the relationship I chose? And that is where the breakup energy begins. And justice coming out here makes this even more uncomfortable, because this doesn't feel like you creating a problem that wasn't there. It feels like you exposed one, not intentionally, just by existing differently. Because justice, psychologically, is about having to look at what is actually true after you've spent a long time explaining it away. And look at these scales. One side has the moon, one side has the sun. That is literally contrast. Wait, because I think this person used to be able to go home and accept certain things without thinking too hard about them. The same conversation every night, the same little irritation. Their partner leaving something on the counter again. Sitting beside each other while both of them are looking at their phones. Nothing dramatic enough to leave over. But now they notice it. That's the problem. Something their partner does that used to get an eye roll suddenly makes them genuinely irritated. They might sit in the car for an extra 3 minutes before going inside. They might come home from seeing you, put their keys down, and immediately feel this weird emotional drop. Like, oh. And I don't think they understood why at first. Because you are not standing there telling them their relationship is wrong. You may not even know any of this is happening. But once somebody experiences themselves feeling awake somewhere else, emotional autopilot becomes harder to tolerate. I'm getting somebody reheating coffee and forgetting it in the microwave. A charger that only works if you bend it a certain way. Somebody checking the time at 11. 11 and then getting annoyed at themselves for noticing. Okay. But justice also has this uncomfortable quality of accountability. So now they're catching themselves making comparisons they don't actually want to make. Their partner tells them a story, and part of their brain wonders how you would have responded. Their partner touches them, and they suddenly become aware that they're distracted. their partner asks, "What's wrong?" And they say, "Nothing." Except now, nothing is carrying a lot. And this is why I don't want to frame this like you swooped in and broke up somebody's happy relationship. Because if the relationship felt completely aligned to them, your glow-up would just be attractive. That's it. They would notice you and go home. But this is making them audit their life. And look at the two skulls sitting right there beside the scales. That feels like two versions of something they can no longer pretend are equal. Wait, actually, no. Because I thought they were comparing you to their partner. I don't think that's the real comparison anymore. They're comparing themselves. Who they are when they're with their partner. And who they become when they're around you. And that is where the Five of Cups reversed gets interesting. Because this person may be realizing they miss themselves. Not just you. Themselves. Wait, because that changes this. Psychologically. The Five of Cups reversed feels like somebody starting to look up after spending too long focused on what their life became, instead of what it could still become. And I don't necessarily think their relationship is horrible. That would almost make this easier. I think there may be genuine history there. Comfort. Loyalty. Somebody who knows how they take their coffee. What side of the bed they sleep on. What show they always rewatch when they're stressed. But that relationship may belong to a version of them they're starting to outgrow. And then you show up like this. More alive. More intentional. And suddenly they're remembering things. Maybe they used to be more playful. Maybe they had some ridiculous business idea they stopped talking about. Maybe they used to work out, paint, travel, make music, dress differently, stay up talking about things that actually excited them. Something about interacting with you is bringing that person back online. I'm seeing somebody fixing their hair in the rearview mirror when they normally wouldn't care. Buying something new and immediately wondering whether you would notice. Looking up a class, a gym membership, a flight. Maybe even an old hobby they abandoned years ago. And then they're sitting there like, why do I suddenly care again? That's where this gets uncomfortable. Because sometimes we think we're attracted to another person when part of what we're actually attracted to is who we become in their presence. Oh, okay. This is bigger than a crush. Because if you make them feel funny, attractive, curious, ambitious, emotionally open again, then being around you is not only giving them butterflies. It is reminding them that those parts of themselves still exist. And then they go back into a life where maybe they've become practical, predictable, responsible, safe. And none of those things are bad. But safe can become strange when you suddenly remember you used to feel alive. The Five of Cups reversed also has this feeling of turning around and realizing there is still something left. Like, I thought this was just who I became. And now they're realizing maybe it isn't. Maybe they didn't lose that version of themselves. Maybe they buried it. And I think that is why your presence is becoming so disruptive. Because now they have to ask themselves a question that has almost nothing to do with whether you're attractive. Did I choose this relationship because this is the life I genuinely wanted? Or because, at the time, it was the life that felt safest? And now the Eight of Swords is here. Which is interesting, because this looks like the moment the relationship stops being private in their own head. Not because they confessed anything. Because their partner can feel the difference. I don't mean they automatically know it's you. I mean they know something is off. Eight of Swords psychologically is that feeling of being trapped inside your own thoughts while everybody around you starts noticing the consequences. And this person is getting harder to read because they're trying so hard to look normal. That's what gives them away. Wait. They may suddenly turn their phone face down when they never used to. Take longer getting ready for something that supposedly isn't important. Be physically sitting next to their partner but mentally somewhere completely different. And their partner notices. Maybe they ask, "Are you okay?" Or worse, "Are we okay?" And I think this person immediately says yes. Too quickly. Because now they have to explain a feeling they haven't even explained to themselves. I'm getting somebody leaving a grocery bag in the trunk and remembering it hours later. A cracked screen protector. Somebody finding an old hair tie around the gear shift and staring at it for no reason. Okay, but look at this card. There are swords everywhere. That feels like thoughts they cannot get away from. So the partner may start reacting to the distance without knowing what caused it. Maybe they become more affectionate. Maybe they start suggesting date nights. Maybe they suddenly want to talk about the future. Or they start picking tiny fights because sometimes it's easier to argue about dishes, lateness, texting, or tone of voice than to say, "I feel like I'm losing access to you." And I don't want to villainize this partner. Because honestly, they might be responding to something real. They may look across the room and catch this person smiling at their phone, then watch the smile disappear the second they realize they're being watched. That would make anybody wonder. But this is where I thought the story would go one way, and it doesn't. Because you would assume all of this effort from their partner would remind them what they have. And maybe it does for a second. They go to dinner, they cuddle, they try harder, they put the phone away, they tell themselves, "See, this is fine." But then something strange happens. The harder their partner tries to recreate the closeness, the more aware this person becomes that they are participating in it instead of actually feeling it. And that realization might be more frightening than the attraction to you ever was. And now the Hermit comes out. Which honestly makes sense, because once they realize they are going through the motions, I think they start pulling inward. Not necessarily away from their partner immediately. Away from everybody. Because psychologically, the Hermit is what happens when you can't keep borrowing answers from the life you already built. You have to sit with yourself. And I think this person hates that part, because now the questions get ugly. Am I being selfish? Am I ruining something good because I'm bored? Am I just confused? What if I leave and realize I made a huge mistake? And then there's the guilt. Because maybe their partner hasn't done anything objectively terrible. Maybe they share a dog, a lease, friends who automatically invite them as a pair. Maybe their families know each other. There could be an anniversary coming up, concert tickets bought months ago, somebody's birthday trip already booked. That stuff matters. It makes leaving feel less like ending a relationship and more like dismantling an entire little ecosystem. Wait, because I'm seeing somebody staring at a shared calendar and feeling weirdly trapped by how many future plans are already sitting there. Like their life has been scheduled before their feelings caught up. And that is why I think they try harder. They initiate affection. They suggest doing something they used to enjoy together. They might buy their partner something for no reason. Cook dinner, plan a weekend. Become almost aggressively present. Because part of them is thinking, if I can just get back to how this used to feel, then I don't have to deal with any of this. But effort and emotion are not the same thing. You can perform closeness. You cannot force yourself to experience it. And the Hermit is uncomfortable because eventually the room gets quiet. The date ends, their partner falls asleep, the television is off. And they are left with themselves again. I'm also getting a half-finished bottle of water beside the bed. Somebody scrolling with the brightness, turned almost all the way down. And a coat that has been sitting over the same chair for weeks. Very specific. But there is something else here that I don't think you would expect. I think they may briefly resent you. Not because you did anything. You didn't ask them to question their life. You didn't tell them to leave anybody. But before you became this emotionally significant, they could live inside their choices without examining them this closely. You made something impossible to unknow. And sometimes people get angry at the mirror before they admit they don't like what it showed them. So if their energy suddenly changes around you, if they get colder, quieter, harder to read, don't assume the feeling disappeared. Because I think this is where they do something that could confuse you. And strength showing up here is interesting, because I think their version of getting control of themselves is creating distance from you. That's the confusing part. They may have been warm one day, really engaged, looking for reasons to talk to you, lingering around you, asking questions they didn't technically need answers to. And then suddenly, nothing. Short responses, less eye contact, almost weirdly formal. Maybe they watch everything you post but stop reacting to it. Maybe after one conversation that felt a little too personal, they disappear for 3 or 4 days and come back, acting like you discussed the weather. Wait, that actually makes sense. Because strength, psychologically, isn't always about going after what you want. Sometimes it's about trying very hard not to. Look at the tiger here. There is instinct. There is desire. But there are also hands around it. Control. Containment. So I think this person is telling themselves, I need to stop feeding this. And they might start mentioning their partner more around you, which could feel almost deliberate. Like suddenly, every story is, we did this, or my partner said that, and you're sitting there thinking, okay. But I think they're reminding themselves as much as they're reminding you. They are trying to put the boundary back where it was, before their feelings started making that boundary feel inconvenient. And I need to be careful here, because somebody pulling away does not automatically mean they secretly want you. Sometimes distance is just distance. But what makes this specific situation different is the sequence. They get closer. Something emotionally real happens. Then they retreat. Then they quietly check whether you're still there. That contradiction is what matters. I'm getting somebody opening a message, closing it, opening it again, and then deciding not to answer until hours later. Also orange clothing, sunflower seeds, and somebody who keeps a ridiculous number of screenshots they never look at again. I don't know. But here is where their plan starts failing. Because I don't think you chase them. You don't immediately ask what happened. You don't scramble to make them comfortable. You just continue. And that silence gives them something they weren't expecting. Consequences. Because I think part of them assumed they could create distance and still know you were emotionally available whenever they decided to come back. But your glow-up changed that too. You're not standing still while they figure themselves out. So now they have to sit with the possibility that pulling away might actually mean losing access to you. And suddenly this isn't a fantasy they can manage privately anymore. Because silence forces a choice. And I think this is where the real decision begins. And then the magician comes out. Okay, because this is where they realize you are not waiting for them to figure out what they want. You are building something, your life. And I think that is actually more intimidating than the attraction. Because the magician, psychologically, is somebody taking what they already have and doing something with it. There's movement here. Agency. You're not just looking better. You're becoming more deliberate. Maybe your schedule is fuller now. Maybe new people are around you. Maybe you're saying no faster. Maybe you stopped explaining why you're unavailable. And there's something about your energy that says, I have somewhere to be. That changes everything. Because when this person pulled away, I think some part of them expected the situation to pause. Like they could go back into their relationship, get themselves together, avoid you for a while, and then eventually return to the exact same version of you. But you kept moving. Wait, that might be the thing that scares them. You didn't punish them. You didn't chase them. You just stopped organizing your emotional world around whether they were coming closer or pulling away. And now they notice little things. You don't light up the same way when they appear. You end the conversation first. Maybe somebody else makes you laugh and they catch themselves watching. Maybe they type something to you, delete it, type it again, and then decide the message sounds too obvious. I'm getting somebody asking a mutual friend something extremely casual like, "Oh, are they going too?" As if they don't care. They care. Also a green hoodie, a keychain with way too many keys on it, and somebody who has 17 tabs open on their phone browser. Why 17? I don't know. But the magician makes this less passive. Because now they have to confront something about themselves. If they lose access to you, because they refuse to make a decision, they cannot blame timing forever. And I don't mean they should leave somebody just to get you. Actually, that's important. Because if a breakup happens here, I'm starting to think it may not initially be about coming toward you at all. It may be about them finally admitting that they have been living reactively. Choosing what is familiar, avoiding uncomfortable conversations, letting circumstances decide their life for them. And then they watch you becoming somebody who does the opposite. That's the mirror. You are choosing yourself in real time. So now they have to decide whether they can do the same. And that brings up a much bigger question. If they actually leave, are they leaving because they want to come toward you? Or are they finally learning how to stand alone? And the 8 of Coins hook coming out here makes me think the answer is, they have work to do. Which is probably not the romantic answer anybody wants. But I think it's the important one. Because psychologically, the 8 of Coins is about what happens after the realization. You actually have to change something. And if this person leaves their relationship, I don't think the healthiest version of this is them breaking up on Tuesday and showing up in your messages on Wednesday like, "So, what are you doing?" No, because then you would have to wonder whether they chose you, or whether they just needed somewhere softer to land. Wait, because that distinction matters. There is attraction here. There may be genuine compatibility here. But forbidden circumstances can make emotions feel enormous. Distance does that. Secrecy does that. Not knowing whether you can have someone does that. Even contrast does that. So if they become available, reality has to test the connection. Can you actually communicate? Do your lives fit? Do they still feel this strongly when you're no longer the exciting person outside of their relationship? And can they be alone long enough to figure out who they are without using you as an emotional bridge? That is what I'm seeing in this card. Look at all these coins. This is repetitive, intentional. One thing at a time. They may need to have the ugly conversation, change living arrangements, tell friends, untangle subscriptions, return a key, move somebody's things out of a bathroom drawer, explain to family why the person they expected at Thanksgiving suddenly isn't coming. That is real life. And honestly, I think that is the sign you should pay attention to. Not some huge confession. Not "I've been thinking about you every night." Not a dramatic message at 1 a.m. accountability. Do they actually clean up their situation? Do they stop creating ambiguity? Do they tell the truth without making you responsible for their decision? Do they approach you when they can approach you openly? Because if this is real, it should survive honesty. And I think that is where you learn whether you were a genuine connection or just the doorway they used to realize they were unhappy. Either way, you still mattered. Just differently. But there's one more thing bothering me about this entire reading. Because we keep calling this your glow up. And yes, maybe you look incredible. Maybe they noticed that first. But I'm looking at this 8 of Coins and realizing, I don't think your appearance is actually the reason you affected them this deeply. I think it's what they watched you do to become this version of yourself. And now the Emperor comes out. Okay, that actually explains it. Because the Emperor is not really giving me, "Look how attractive you became." It's giving me, "Look how differently you started treating yourself." There's a crown here. There are lions. There's this whole feeling of somebody finally taking authority over their own life. And I think that is what they watched happen to you. Maybe you stopped explaining every decision, stopped trying to convince people to understand you, stopped chasing conversations that felt one-sided. Maybe you started protecting your time, your money, your body, your plans, your peace. And somewhere along the way, you stopped abandoning yourself just to keep somebody else comfortable. Wait, that might be the actual glow-up. The appearance was just the visible part. Because people can handle you getting prettier. What gets uncomfortable is watching you become somebody who will leave situations that no longer respect you. Especially when they have been staying in one. That's the contrast again. They're looking at you making decisions they've been afraid to make, changing things, letting people misunderstand you, saying no, walking away, starting over. And meanwhile, they're still telling themselves, well, it's complicated, and maybe it is complicated, but you became living evidence that complicated does not mean impossible. That is what destabilized them. Oh, this is strange. Because I think they may believe they are desperate to get closer to you. And yes, part of them probably is. But part of what they want from you is not actually you. It's your courage. They want to know what it feels like to choose something. Because it is true, instead of because it is familiar. That's why the attraction became comparison. That's why the comparison created tension at home. That's why they pulled away. That's why your silence bothered them. That's why losing access suddenly felt terrifying. You represent movement, and they have been standing still. I'm getting somebody reorganizing a desk late at night, throwing away old papers they've kept for absolutely no reason, and suddenly changing a password they've used for years. Very Emperor. But this also changes the whole idea that you somehow stole somebody. You didn't. You stopped shrinking enough for other people to stay comfortable around your potential. And somebody watching you do that started realizing where they had been shrinking too. So yes, your glow-up may be connected to this breakup energy. But not because you seduced somebody away from their partner. Because your life became a mirror they could no longer avoid. And now there's only one question left. If they actually become available, and they finally come toward you, what are you supposed to do with that? And the Knight of Wands reversed answers that immediately. Do not run toward them just because they finally run toward you. That's the first thing. Because psychologically, this card reversed feels like somebody having a huge burst of emotion before they necessarily have the stability to carry it properly. And that matters here. They could leave. They could finally admit what they feel. They could send the message you wondered if they would ever send. And you still do not have to turn that into a relationship overnight. Wait. Because I think that might actually be the final test of your glow-up. Can you still choose yourself when the thing you wanted suddenly chooses you? That's different, because maybe this person comes in excited. I need to see you. I've wanted to tell you this forever. I finally ended it. Okay, but what happens next Tuesday? And 3 weeks later, when the adrenaline wears off, when leaving their relationship becomes real instead of theoretical, that is what I would watch. Not intensity, consistency, not whether they confess, whether they can communicate when nothing dramatic is happening, not whether they say they chose you. Whether they took responsibility for ending something that was already no longer right for them. Because you never ask them to leave. You do not need to audition for the position that opened up afterward. And you definitely do not need some situation where they are technically single, but still emotionally tangled, still talking to their ex every night, still hiding you, still making you feel like you're participating in unfinished business. No, if they come toward you, let them come toward you clearly. I'm getting somebody deleting an old contact and then adding it back 2 days later. A duffel bag that never gets fully unpacked. Somebody driving around with the gas light on because they always swear they'll stop at the next station. That feels very Knight of Wands reversed. Impulse without follow-through. So let reality answer the question. Maybe there really is something here. Maybe once everything is clean, you discover the connection is even better without all the tension around it. That's possible, but you don't owe the story that ending. Your job was never to break them up. Your job was never even to wake them up. You just stopped abandoning yourself, and your growth created contrast. It made certain truths harder for this person to avoid. The cup overflowed because something was already there. The cracks became visible because somebody finally turned the light on. So if a breakup happens, that is not your trophy. The real glow-up is this. You became so honest about the life you want that people around you can no longer comfortably lie to themselves about theirs.